Hello and welcome to the PFFUI podcast. On this month's episode, President Tony Murray is joined by Hamilton County Professional Firefighters Local 4416 President Jim Butts and the Executive Director of the Illinois Police Benevolent Labor Committee, David Amerson. Jim and David discuss the parallels of being an active member of your local and a productive member of your fire department, as well as the history of labor. Enjoy the show. Hello and welcome to the PFFUI podcast. My name is Eric Schoib, and as always, here's President Tony Murray. Hey, Tony, how are things going today?
Eric, things are going well. It's a busy day.
Busy day.
It's a nice day.
Yeah, busy day here in our state's capital. Today is our new member conference, followed by the annual Indiana Fallen Firefighters Remembrance Ceremony.
It is. Here we are, September. It's beautiful weather, and great day to record a podcast, I think.
Gorgeous. I don't think there's any better time than now.
Is there a bad day to record a podcast?
I don't know if there is or not, but I don't want to find out. So we are joined by two of our presenters here today to talk a little bit about more of themselves and their presentations given to our attendees today. So, Tony, I will give you the honors to introduce our guests today.
All right. So as part of our agenda today, we've got a packed one-day session for new members who we invited here. Somebody, that's a local member across the state. To come in and with their local officer to join them on the first ever new member conference. And we're talking a lot about our history. We're talking a lot about the services that the PFFUI and the IFF provide and how those things kind of intersect into the locals across the state. So I think that, we've got great turnout. And we had a good lineup of speakers. And two of them that are here with us today is Local 4416 President Jim Butts is here, and he did a great presentation on sort of the parallels between being an active member of your local and how that translates into being a really productive member on the fire department as well. So welcome, Jim.
Thank you, Tony. Thank you, Eric.
And as in addition to this conversation we're going to have all the way from Springfield, Illinois, is David Amerson is here, and he just finished up giving a great presentation on sort of the history of labor and focusing specifically on, how the sort of American worker has experienced challenges, I guess. I mean, it was a pretty powerful presentation, but experienced challenge of how things have evolved. The intersection of public sector, locals, and the IFF history. So I really appreciate you being here with us today, David. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony.
I'll just offer you, David, to kind of give a little introduction of yourself, and then we'll go to Jim.
So I'm the Executive Director of the Illinois Police Benevolent Labor Committee. It's I would say, probably the largest municipal police union in Illinois, if you leave Chicago out. And before that, I worked for AFSCME, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees, as the retiree director. They have an auxiliary retiree chapter that's 27,000 members across the state of Illinois, primarily used, during your retirement years, keep you involved in the union. So there's a lot of phone banks and direct lobbying of state representatives. Before that, I worked for the American Federation of Government Employees. That's the federal government union that was famously busted earlier this year. And I've done worked in various capacities with other unions before that.
So what do you do for the organization now?
So now I'm the executive director. I just assumed that role a few months ago, actually. I've been with the PBPA for 10 years now. Before that, I was a staff attorney and represented City of Springfield police officers, East St. Louis police officers, Elgin police officers, a bunch of correctional units, a lot of civilian units, too, across the state. And, right now we're still kind of staffing up, so I'm doing that job, too, still representing those units. And I'm the director of our statewide association.
All right. And also a veteran of the United States Marine Corps.
Yeah, seems like a lifetime ago, but yes.
Yeah. Well, we're glad to have you here today. And although you work largely with police, I think that you were well received today. You get our people, you get firefighters, even though you spent a lot of time with police officers. So they appreciated you, and we appreciate you being here today. Jim, how about a little introduction about you?
Yeah, Jim Butts. I am the president for Local 4416. I am the second president in our local's history, only behind you, Tony. Your 18-year reign. Biggest, fanciest shoes I've ever had to take over. But
Comfortable shoes.
yeah. Been president there since 2023. Prior to that, had some time as our director of operations and served as the Noblesville district vice president for 6 years. I'm a fire captain for the Noblesville Fire Department. I've been on Noblesville for 19 years. Prior to that, I had no real experience as a firefighter, just some college and some time in the Army.
All right. Also, so we got a lot of public service here. So, yeah. And Jim and I worked together a long time in the firehouse as well. So why don't you tell us a little bit about what your presentation was about today, Jim?
Yeah, I think you mentioned the parallels between being a good union member and being a professional firefighter, which I think professionalism is kind of what it all boils down to on both sides of it. They're not separate. They should be complementary of each other and not competing in nature. So I think today my focus on in my presentation was mainly driven towards that the two can coincide together, and that the value of being a professional firefighter helps us from a union leader standpoint. When we have people out doing good work, they're well trained, professional on scene, they're compassionate. That parlays into negotiating with stakeholders within the community.
And we're largely really judged, I think, by the people that we serve and that we work, in these communities to provide a vital service, whether that be, fire-based EMS or, fire and rescue on all things. But it's about us and our drive to provide the best product on the street. And I think, we heard that theme today. And so I think, would you agree with that these two things coincide in terms of delivering, the best product on the street that we can? And how does that relate to our efforts, for representing our members? What's that look like?
So for a new member that is attending today, or just a new member in general, I think that it's important to understand the union's role in their professional development as a firefighter. For me personally, like I mentioned in my presentation, I had a strong family background in unions, so I understood their role. But like I was honest with the group here today, I didn't know that there was a firefighters union when I joined the Noblesville Fire Department. And when I got on,
it was young.
It was young, yeah.
And that hadn't been around very long.
I hired on in 2006, and you guys organized in 2005. So I think we were
2002 initially.
Correct.
Initially, yeah.
Correct. Yeah. As 4416 stood up in 2005. I think everybody was new to it. So everybody was learning what those roles were. You had recently established a merit system that we're still learning about today. 20 years later. So I think that for me, just being observant as a new individual, kind of watching those around me that had the experience, learning from their struggles. Because what I found now is, fast forward 19 years later, sometimes I'm the only person in the room that has the actual knowledge of what actually occurred. From the standpoint of, like we talked about with standing up the merit system, our first contracts, kind of looking back through the history of those, knowing why things are the way they are today. I think that goes a long way for a new member to, one, just be observant, and two, know the history, because history repeats itself, and we're finding that today with some of the impacts of Senate Bill 1. We don't know what that's going to look like for a lot of municipalities with raises or anything like that. And
Senate Bill 1 was really a restructuring of how municipal governments are able to generate revenue and how much, and those things. So, and that revenues, taxes, fees, that funds our ability to do our job, and respond to emergencies effectively in communities.
Yes, and so some of the things I'm trying to relate to some of our new members is that we've kind of already experienced this. In 2008, we had the property tax restructure and
caps, capping
and
property tax.
yes, and so I remember there being several years where we had no raises and flat budgets, and trying to relay that information back to these new members.
So, David, you've had a lot of experience. You provided us a really deep dive in the history of public sector unions, and can you talk a little bit about why is it important? Why does it matter? Why should people be a part of this organization, other than we do I think a really good job of representing our members, but why does it all matter?
Well, I think it's tied into how you view yourself as an American. If you really study labor history and the broad sweep of what workers specifically in this country have gone through since the founding of the country, after a while you study enough of this history, you come to the inescapable conclusion that there is a struggle between workers and the people that profit from their labor. And part of that struggle, too, when you start talking like this, is that the other side, whether it be wealthy corporations, however you frame it, city officials sometimes, when you start talking about the fact that there are haves and have-nots in this country, or that workers oftentimes aren't getting the value of their labor, it instantly cues in people's minds in America that, oh, this guy is, a radical, or painted as a communist, or however it's been addressed historically, or whatever was pushed culturally from those types of organizations. And, this has left American workers right now alienated from what they understand as their role in the country, and also not understanding the history of what came before them. And the way people talk about labor unions, just even what we call the greatest generation, my grandparents' generation, the people that fought World War II, went through the Great Depression, it would be unfathomable to look down your nose at organized labor if you're a working class person. Most people in Illinois had pictures of John L. Lewis, the mine workers president, and FDR up in their kitchen. Labor unions were seen as the primary vehicle for worker uplift. And when you look over the expanse of American history, right to the present day today, what we're seeing in that struggle is playing out right now. And it has seemed in the 1970s and 80s like the wealthy and private industry got over on private sector unions. And what we've seen in the public sector over the last 15 years has been that same kind of struggle. And endpoint has played out for us as well. And I don't say endpoint like the fight is over, but it's certainly been exacerbated since 2009, 2010. And right up to the current day, it's increasingly more difficult to be a public sector union, to advocate for public sector unionism. Although I would say just in very recent history, I think COVID especially, and since 2020, really drew the distinction home. And people, they call us essential workers, but it's really hard as hell to get, in my world at least, people to be police officers nowadays. Who wants to be the nation's villain? Who wants to do this kind of work? So, we are reasserting ourselves, getting negotiating power from the fact that so little people want to do this type of work, and it's being so undervalued. But, basically what I want to get across to union members is you are part of this struggle, and these tactics have been played out before, and there's a playbook for victory. Right, and it just starts with seeing yourselves as a worker. And I think that that's really what good unionism is about, that when police officers or any public sector worker sees themselves, as a member of the community, not as something apart, that I'm a worker and I have this kind of same struggle that other workers have, it can really be the bridge that covers the gap between what people view public sector workers and how they view them and where we're at right now in this moment in time. Even if people have very strong opinions about policing one way or another, but even firefighters, you hear it all the time, well, I don't have a pension anymore. Why should they have one, right? Well, that's because 40 years ago, your factory job was either outsourced or whatever private sector you work in now, they probably had a pension 40 years ago. It was taken away because you don't have a union, right? So we want you to have a union too. This isn't a zero-sum game, right? But you've heard that before, that people that prey on that, the fact that public sector unions have been able to protect the kind of gains and benefits. And that's why it's been really easy to set them as the scapegoats, as played out in Indiana, Michigan, and Wisconsin.
You bring up an interesting point about retirement. So, before the New Deal, before Social Security, railroad workers, police officers, firefighters developed their own retirement systems, and it usually was out of some sort of tragedy. Whether that be, here in Indianapolis, I know in Indiana, there was a bow and marrow fire in downtown Indianapolis, just a few blocks from where we are, that killed over a dozen firefighters in that, and there was no benefit or any way to help the widows at the time and the children. And that inspired the community to say, we need to do something to address this. And the reason I mentioned Social Security, so then Social Security's formed, but police officers and firefighters at that time were excluded, and railroad workers were prohibited from being part of that. So, there was the development of retirement systems and how those have expanded for public safety was out of a need. And these are inherently dangerous jobs, whether you're a police officer, a firefighter, or paramedic, EMT. These are dangerous jobs, and you're subjected to the same. So things are viewed through a little bit of a different lens, and I think that it's important for us to talk about that and recognize that. What do you think? I mean, you brought up an interesting point about the retirements.
Yeah. So
the difference between,
right, and so
I don't have it, so you shouldn't either.
Right, and the police benevolent, the benevolent part of it. The early part of our history wasn't in unionism; it was in setting up retirement systems for the benevolence of fallen police officers to support their families. Oftentimes, workers had to structure those things themselves. But no, I think at its core too, this is how we view ourselves as workers and as what it means to be American, and the obligations that employers and the government may owe to you. The right to grow old, the right to be frail, to be weak, to be human is tied up in these kind of ideas about you are not just someone that produces value for some shareholder, right? That you're a human being, you're an American, that we are going to look out for each other as a community and protect each other. The retirement issue has been especially tragic because all you hear from politicians anymore is we need to raise the retirement age. Life expectancy is going up. Now, I think that's largely driven by they want people to stay in the workforce longer, right? Because the more people you have in the workforce for a set amount of jobs, the less bargaining power unions have, right? If they can just fire you and there's 10 other people lined up to do that job, you don't have much bargaining power. So let's expand that any way we can other than shoring up Social Security, shoring up defined benefit pension systems, and so on.
Mm-hmm. And I think you mentioned another point, too, that I know that this strikes home for Jim, is that, whether you're a police officer, firefighter, or EMS professional, it's not just showing up to work. You're showing up to help people in your community. There's an investment that we have in these jobs. And I know that you see that, Jim. You represent 7 departments in the local where you're at, and I think that we're always trying to make sure we're always selling, our profession. We're always trying to recruit the next generation of firefighters, and I think that through that and trying to meet and be express those needs with decision makers in cities and towns that you represent, I think that we're a group that really is able to paint the picture of what public safety needs to be in a particular community. We're the subject matter experts on these. But I think there's an education piece. Can you talk a little bit about what you have used to educate decision makers about shaping, the fire service in these areas?
I think one of the most important things when it comes to talking to stakeholders about our profession, whether it be the fire or EMS side, I think the best thing we've ever done is the Fire Ops 101. I think getting them out there to actually have them feel the heat, as the title says, goes a long way. We've had such great feedback from that. At that event alone, we can talk about the importance of staffing, making sure that there's 4 people on a fire apparatus, making sure that ambulances are well stocked with the equipment and medicines that we may need. We've had such good feedback from that I wish everybody would take advantage of that, because that is, for us, it's getting everybody in one location at one time and selling that message of what our people do on a daily basis. So many council people, I know we've burned a couple of them and
Accidentally,
yeah, that's why they sign waivers. But, having them sweat, having them, pull a charge 2 1/4-inch line up multiple flights of stairs, I think that's where they really feel what we're doing.
Yeah.
It's
one thing to talk about something and try to describe something, but, to actually do it, the smells, the feels, the exhaustion, we don't if we really wanted to be real, we could put some, other fluids and substances, such as
for
Code
sure,
Brown.
easily, yeah.
Anybody that's listening, know what Code Brown is, but we don't do that as part of fire ops. But there's nothing more effective than actually experiencing it. And I think you're right. I think that people walk away from that with an experience that few get to ever experience. And, it's a day of kind of putting them into the situations that our members are put in professionally every day.
And I would ideally like to get those stakeholders in fire ops super early in their public service career, whether they're elected or they're working for. We've had IPEP come through, we've had other organizations come through, because I think then when we're talking about like wages and benefits, they've experienced a little bit, just a day in the life of a firefighter. Now we can really kind of hone in on why it's important to make sure we're fairly compensated, that we're properly staffed. And we've had several council people. I love watching when they post pictures and you see the white fire ops helmet in the back.
Yeah.
That it speaks volumes to, I think, the program itself. We've instituted a lot of, in Hamilton County in 4416, we are 3 departments away. Like you mentioned, we represent 7 departments, almost 500 people, 500 firefighters. That we are 3 departments away from all of 4416 having a recent GIS study from the IFF. I think that goes a long way. Recently, Westfield Fire conducted a GIS. It actually made the news a couple times. We've received several calls from council on how awesome that was to see an actual heat map of what station coverage looks like now compared to what it would look like with appropriate placed stations and properly staffed apparatus. That's an amazing feature that we have at our disposal, and I'm happy to say that we're working on Cicero, Jackson Township, and White River right now to kind of knock those out, and then all 7 of our organizations will have had a GIS study in the last 4 years.
And the GIS is essentially using tech to justify in real time and where your runs and kind of to justify the need for staffing, where you're making response times, where you have gaps in response times to help build a better plan, right? And that's a good use of tech. David, do you have any thoughts on?
Yeah, that was all very interesting and tracks with what we do a lot in the police sector too. For ride-alongs, for police and fire, this is a really interesting topic that's come up. I won't tell you the city, but one of the cities that we represent, police, we had 12-hour shifts, and the mayor wanted to do a ride-along. So we made sure that she was on a 12-hour shift. She did the whole 12-hour shift on a Saturday night in the middle of the summer in the worst part of town that gets the most calls, and there was a lot of really heavy stuff going on. So we wanted to expose her to that type of thing.
But probably a regular shift?
Yes.
Nothing special?
Nothing
a
special.
regular shift?
Right. But, we weren't going to put her like on where the mall is or something like
yeah.
for shoplifters. We wanted her to
Right.
see it. So she saw that and was, her takeaway was you guys need to be paid a lot more. The firefighter union, who we're very close to in that community, they said, that's a great idea, we should do it too. But they didn't do what you guys did and put her through the paces. Instead, they were barbecuing, right, and doing those things. This was their flagship station, so it wasn't a particularly active one. So the mayor came away from this experience saying, man, the police work so much harder than fire. This is not typically the case. Right.
I think, using tech, using data, using real-life experiences, fold that into exposing decision makers to the regular elements of a shift, really, I think, begins to drive the message home. And that's what we're doing in our capacity in representing our members. And you brought up a good point. A lot has changed in law enforcement. Much has changed in terms of the traditional responsibilities, as I see it, in the fire service. If you think about it, in the course of a 24-hour shift, there's a variety of things that can happen. And, something you said struck me. We could be delivering a baby and then 30 minutes later, fighting a fire in a home or a multi-story structure, and then go into a gunshot. I mean, it is sort of amazing that the type of things that our professionals do, whether it's in law enforcement or in the fire service.
Right. And I just one thing, in this moment too, it's really easy, I think, for a lot of public sector unions faced with, these kind of difficulties to say, I'm going to lean into rhetoric, right? And, nothing against some of the other police unions out there, but, what we often tell our members is like, do you want to win a Facebook fight or do you want to win a contract fight, right? Because when unions are leading with, hey, you're a special breed of person and everyone else is so mean to you and that's so unfair, instead of focusing on real nuts and bolts union issues and moving the ball for members, it's essentially like it's a tactic that management uses. You're paying them in pride, right? You're relying on the fact that they see themselves as something else, as not as workers, not as a member of the community, and playing into that to the detriment of your gains at the bargaining table, the things that actually protect those members in some way. So yeah, that's that kind of line of discussion that plays out for us a lot because there's a constant tension from our members about how to react to the national conversation on policing. And we tell our members, we want you to be safe and protected. So we are going to talk to policymakers in a way that they understand and not just come out with, our fists up right away.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And it's up to us to make those points and to really guide the course of, one, driven by putting a great product on the street, which, Jim, you articulated well, I think, but also making sure that in an inherently dangerous career that we take up those issues and make sure that those are priorities so that, we're not harming our own members, on a regular basis. Well, I'd just like to say thanks for being here today as we kind of wrap, and I think that both of your presentations were great to kind of communicate the message to our members that are gathered here for this conference. So I appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the PFFUI podcast. Follow us on social media by searching the Professional Firefighters Union of Indiana. For more information about news and upcoming events, visit www.pffui.com. Until next time, this is PFFUI Communications Director Eric Shoaib. Stay safe.